And we are live. This
Woo!
is an experiment.
In many ways.
No, Scott, wait. Every time someone says Trump, take a drink. That's not going to happen. Everybody, this is a new experiment. I'm joined by the legendary Alison Morrow.
Yes, the notorious.
Notorious. I prefer legendary.
The notorious ALI.
Notorious Ali. Okay. So Ali.
Yeah.
For the folks who don't know you, tell us about yourself real quickly.
I was a TV news reporter for 12 years and quit my TV news career back in 2019. I covered the environment for the last 5 years of my career out in the Pacific Northwest for the NBC affiliate in Seattle. And I have also been a producer for a national cable news show that was right out of college. I did a Master of Divinity degree in between being a producer and going back to news as a reporter. My specialization was in psychology and counseling. So I'm really interested in human behavior stuff, attachment theories. And that's like, it goes everything from how kids attach to their parents to how people attach to ideologies and worldviews, politics and whatnot. And now I'm a mom and I have a YouTube channel where I focus on free speech and media analysis issues. And we live kind of in the middle of nowhere. We moved from Seattle to Eastern Washington a year ago and kind of just living the rural life and really enjoying it. Our long-term plan is we're renovating an Airstream to live in and then build a family homestead. I think that basically sums it up. Oh, and I have a daughter
who may be calling at any point during this episode.
So if I bolt for a second, it's not because I was offended. It's because I have no childcare right now. So,
or she was not only offended,
or I was both. I was,
Exactly.
I just use it as an excuse. Actually, having a kid is an awesome excuse for to get out of a lot of things.
Oh, good point. Good point. Now, everybody, this is a new regular thing that we're going to be doing. And I encourage everybody, because we'll do 1 week on my channel, another week on Alison's channel, going back and forth. So if you aren't already subscribed, go to youtube.com/Alison Morrow, as you see on the screen. Please subscribe there so you can catch every episode. And the theme of the show, if you will, is, well, news with booze, because we can't really take it straight. So what are you having tonight, Alison?
I am having this winter ale from Ninkazi. I say it Ninkazi Brewing Company out of Eugene, Oregon. I'll read you. It says, the Cascades are our winter playground and Slayer is our après-ski. So that's what they call it, Slayer Winter Ale. It has a deep chocolatey malt flavor with a lasting bitterness, like a toasty fire on a dark night. And I will say I tend to be somebody who likes stronger beers, like stronger tasting beers. I always say that if it looks the same color when it goes in as when it comes out, it's not for me.
Okay. There's an old British saying about American beer that it's like effing in a canoe, too close to water.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah. It's funny though, because my husband, and I kind of wonder if they're trained this way in the military, but he can drink Miller Lite like it's going out of business. And no offense to Miller Lite, but no thanks.
No, and it probably just does nothing. It's like water.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. I don't know. So yeah, I prefer something where you have fewer of them, but they're tastier.
Well, perfect. And on that note, I have an IPA, locally brewed.
Oh, perfect.
Martmouth in Norfolk, Virginia area. And to put it out there, if you happen to be a craft brewery or connected to a craft brewery, we're always open to trying new brews and looking for sponsorship. So please let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, my dog is seconding that. I don't know if anyone can hear her as well, but okay, because I think we were waiting for a jungle gym for our daughter to get. We just ordered her one because she's kind of becoming more mobile, and I think Amazon may have just shown up. So, God.
Well, awesome. Okay, now what everybody's drinking here too. So we've got some. Let's see. And yes, I know, but you don't have to have alcohol. Somebody is saying that they're on the wagon, they're having coffee. I understand that completely. You can have water, coffee, tea. As a matter of fact, I have a tea sponsor, thedragontreasure.com and Unstructured we'll get you 10% off.
I just muted myself and screamed at my dog. Sorry, everybody. It's the UPS guy I just got here. So God.
Perfect.
I'm doing this all by myself. I don't know if people realize that. Well, it's a lot different, obviously, when you're in mainstream media, or really you work for anybody but yourself.
Sure.
You not only have like a whole team of people that are working with you to make sure all the technical sides of things and people are quiet and whatnot, but you're also somewhere else beside your house. So it's a very contained environment for the most part. So this is kind of the Wild West of broadcasting. Well,
perfect. And as I said, Alison and I, we've met each other relatively recently and wound up we get on really well, and we're always texting each other because we're like, have you seen this? Have you heard this?
Yeah.
Have you seen this? Oh, that's kind of crazy.
And do your commenters say this? Because my commenters...
Yes, well, there's that too.
There's like the comment of the day. This is my comment of the day.
All right. I turned up my gain. Somebody's saying that you were louder than me.
Oh.
Oops.
I can turn down my microphone. I don't know how to do that right now.
No worries.
My engineer is my husband. He's gone.
Well, he's keeping the world safe. So, okay. So to start things out, we're going to essentially cover the news. And I encourage everybody to, if there's something you want to hear or talk about, we're always going to be taking some stories in and interested in these. You can follow us both on Locals. Both of us have a channel there just under our names, Eric Hunley or Alison Morrow. And we have it at the cheapest possible level if you guys want to subscribe. But you can submit stories there. You can always tweet them at us. We're very, very interested in whatever's going on. Now, just before the show started, I'm going to share our first story because it was kind of a surprise. Larry Flynt just died. And Alison is muted, but I know she has a deep impact. But
sorry, I'm muted because I don't know if you can. It's like lots of noises back there. No, I didn't know about that.
Well, it literally just came in minutes ago. And if we talk about free speech, which is important to both of us, and, I'm representing Skynet, of course, I'm in Google, and he is an incredibly important figure in the world of free speech. I mean, obviously, many people would consider him to be a repugnant individual, or at least his content to be repugnant, but his case went all the way to Supreme Court and ultimately won, and it was a marker for Supreme Court, for justice, if you will. And to maybe give us a little bit of insight on that, we have a surprise guest with us today here, Nate the lawyer.
Woo!
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, what are you drinking tonight, Nate?
Just some white wine. I made some spaghetti for the kids, so it's my pandemic diet. So white wine. I don't have anything too heavy today. Usually have Jack Daniel's whiskey. I love Jack Daniel's for some reason.
Is that a Chardonnay, a Chardonnay, as they say, or a Sauvignon Blanc, or what kind of white wine drinker? Sure. What is it?
I think it's like a Riesling. I'm not even sure.
It's a box. Some box.
Yeah, my wife buys it and she's like, "Hey, try it." I'm like, "Oh, this is pretty good wine." So I sip it like I know what I'm talking about. It's pretty sweet. Yeah, it's more like a Riesling wine.
Yeah, I can't drink white wine anymore. It gives me headaches. I think it's the sugar. I used to love it. Nice Sauvignon Blanc on a hot day. Doesn't get much better than that, but
it's supposed to be red wine with like steak, and then white wine with something else. Like it's gonna be like a
oysters, seafood. Yeah. Yeah. And I still every once in a while I'll have a glass if I'm having some kind of seafood dish and we're on vacation, and I'm like, all right, it's worth the risk. I'm just gonna, if I have headache. But on a regular basis, when I have to function, I steer away from it. And I'm always double fisting, as everyone can see. I always have water, and if you gotta hydrate, two sips of water for every sip of alcohol.
Well, she's a pro.
Mm-hmm.
I just have 2 cans of beer.
I was in the news business. You don't get through the news without drinking.
That's where you get some of your best sources from, right? When they drink, yeah.
Or your best ideas. Yeah.
I remember when I was at the DA.
Go ahead.
No, I remember at the DA's office, we used to go out like every Thursday night to a bar. And the reason why we choose Thursdays is because it was super cheap on Thursday nights because nobody was partying on Thursday night. So we would go to the night but you see all the reporters also coming to party Thursday night because they wanted to hear like the gossip in the office and all that stuff. So it's pretty interesting to see how, our local watering hole was a source for information.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the reasons that I demanded having a work cell phone, which it may seem crazy to people that you wouldn't give a reporter a work cell phone, but I was actually the first person, a reporter at my last station, to get a work cell phone, because everybody else, they would just reimburse you on your personal cell for data. And I was like, no, because I used to hand out my card to everybody. I don't care who you are. That was how I got the best stories. You could be the nuttiest person walking down the street, and I'm like, call me, but I don't want you to call my personal cell. So, yeah.
That, trust me, I've had that problem too at the DA's office. I remember there was one witness. I'm like, oh, here, just take my cell phone. And that was all she wrote. I was like, I'll never do that again.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, as we're doing all this new, we're going to do it fairly frequently, either weekly, fortnightly. I always like that, fortnightly.
Yeah,
so cool. It's
now I know what that means. I wasn't even totally sure what that meant until it applied to us.
Oh, really? Yes, I love this. Set up every 2 weeks, which is confusing because it's like, is it bi-weekly? No, bi-weekly could be twice weekly, or it could be every 2, and it gets confusing. But fortnightly is very distinct and very much
I'll be right back.
Applicable. And we will hopefully from time to time bring in experts such as Nate. And I wanted to bring in Nate because he's been following the impeachment, but since I've already got him here, Larry Flynt dying is kind of a big deal. I don't know if you're familiar with this case or not.
Yeah, I think well, it wasn't really taught to us in law school, but it's obviously one of the fundamental cases for free speech, right? A lot of people, what was the name of the magazine that he published? Hustler.
Only because I'm looking at the article right now. Does it come right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But I remember Hustler from oh, we got a little with you. I remember. Now I feel bad because now what we're talking about now, we're about to go into Hustler.
She can't hear.
But one of the things that by challenging the amount of censorship that was going on in the South and these Dixie states, is a lot of people don't understand how oppressive it was back then. Things that you could say and things you couldn't say even in print media. And the Larry Flynt, he went to jail and he even got shot, right? He got shot and paralyzed even over this whole scenario. So he's from a First Amendment view, he's a titan of the legal of that legal sphere. But there are other things that he did that were a little less desirable. But it's interesting. We used to say in law school, a lot of our cases when it comes to jurisdiction happens. I mean, a lot of these First Amendment cases are either sex shops or Jehovah's Witnesses, because those are the two people who always challenge the law and always challenge those boundaries that I think we set for ourselves in our society. How far does my freedom actually reach?
Well, isn't that a principle of free speech? Is you're not exactly protecting popular speech or gentle, loving speech. You're protecting the repugnant ones or the edge cases, which he is, right?
Well, it's. I think the term free speech is deceptive, and it's deceptive because in the legal sphere, it's not really known as free speech, but really protected speech. What speech is protected? All speech is free, but it depends on whether it's protected or not by the government. And when we're talking about protected speech, I think a lot of people don't understand that your free speech is only against government intrusion, government censorship of speech. So when you start talking about YouTube, Facebook, and all that, and people say, they're violating my First Amendment rights, it's just not true, because that's not accurate, because they are private actors. If the government, if the state comes in and says you can't say this, you can't do this, those are violations of your constitutional rights. Private entities can't do it. So, and even in that sphere, then we're talking about what speech is protected, which speech is not protected. So a lot of times for students, when I was teaching at the law school, I would tell students, don't think about it as free speech, think about it as protected speech versus non-protected speech.
Okay. And he was important for protected speech because his repugnant material was considered protected.
Yes.
Was this the case with the Supreme Court justice who said that about pornography?
I know when I see it.
I know it when I see it.
I'm not sure if it was this. I think it was another case. It was an earlier case, because for those of you who don't know, the Supreme Court, before they came up with the test, what they used to do is that they used to actually watch all of the illicit videos and read all of the illicit magazines that came in, because the rule was, what's obscene is I'll know it when I see it.
Oh,
so like every term you have all these older men from the Supreme Court going and watch all these porn movies. It was like a nice occurrence to see if it was obscene. So then after thousands of movies started coming in, they were like, all right, enough of this. We're going to stop watching these movies, not because we don't want to, because it's just too many coming in. And then they made a rule. I forget the exact rule, but it's about local customs. What's right for that community. Because what's right in New York may not be right in Iowa. So they factored a test. They created a test that was kind of responsive to where the speech was being said and those local customs, instead of just having like a blanket rule.
Allison, I know you're a huge Hustler fan. What are your thoughts?
I saw somebody write porn isn't speech, but porn is speech, isn't it?
Yes,
technically.
Yes. It's
a performance art.
Correct.
If you will.
Yeah. It's actually the famous case.
Listen, you don't have to go too far on Instagram to wonder what that is nowadays too. I mean, I don't even know where the line is anymore for classifying porn.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, like, even like for strippers, there like a whole bunch of cases for strippers and pasties that went up to the Supreme Court about strippers and pasties. Yeah.
What happens when you drink alcohol on your live stream?
Oh, okay, I have a question about strip. No, this is important now. Let me stop everything. Question about strippers.
Mm-hmm.
Do they wear masks while the rest is naked in the current environment?
I haven't.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
interesting.
It's a consideration to wonder about, right?
After Nate gives you his pasties story, remind me to tell you about when I was shooting at a strip club for the Republican National Convention.
Okay.
Ooh, that
I think
sounds
I
like
like yours.
Story. Yeah. No, my story is that there was a local ordinance, and I think in somewhere in Pennsylvania, in which they said that everyone had to be fully clothed, right? So you couldn't wear, so the performers, the exotic performers, were saying, well, you're going to kill our business if we all have to be clothed, and nobody's going to pay us, so forth. So the strippers sued all the way to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said yes. Essentially, the women who were performing, they had an erotic message, and their right to convey that erotic message was protected under the First Amendment, but only to a certain extent. And then you had the health and safety exception. The reason why they said you had to wear pasties was because of health and safety. We don't want people naked because communicable disease, so forth. So it was like a health and safety issue. Like, in other words, they were like, this is protected, but there's a health and safety issue of the reason why you have to wear these things.
I love when they parse things. I love
What
that.
is the health and safety issue of a pasty? I don't understand.
I'm not sure if it was because they believe that men got more aggressive with women who are fully nude. I'm not. I forget the final details, but it was like the court kind of said that's protected. You're able to communicate your erotic message, but
not too much.
But not too much.
Weird. Okay, so I was shooting years ago when the RNC was coming to Tampa. And people who know Tampa know that it's well known for its wide variety of exotic nightlife. And
oh yeah.
So they were all trying to compete to get the business when it came to town. And so some had started offering digital access so you could watch this is pre-COVID, but they're probably doing a lot of this now. And then you could do chats with your favorite stripper, and then hopefully you would come to Tampa, and then you would want to go meet, see this person in real life. So I remember, they told their audience that we were there shooting because they were doing a live show at the time, and who was there and everything. And I remember walking across the stage when there was nobody there yet, so that I could get to the other side to talk to somebody I needed to interview. And somebody made it rain on me. Literally, they're like, it's, Hugh from Ohio is making it rain on Allison. And so like $100 dropped from the ceiling onto me. And I did rethink my career for a second, but then I was like, so it was pretty funny though. And I also remember asking them how they got such amazing abs because, I've never been able to get the rock hard abs no matter how hard I try. And they're like,
pole dancing's huge now.
That's exactly what they said. They looked at me like I was a total idiot. They're like, we literally dance on poles all day long. Like if you do that, you're
in amazing shape.
Yeah. So.
Not to mention some, well, not all, but some might have extracurricular habits.
True. Yeah.
And may intake some materials and not bother eating as much because of the substances that they are imbibing in.
Yeah. Well, in my case, it's probably drinking too much of this beer.
Yeah, or maybe having a child.
Yeah, and that's true.
All right. So the reason we brought Nate on, and I know Nate actually has his own live stream he's got to do with uncivil law coming up at 9:00. So I can't.
We moved it back to 10, so we got a little time.
Oh, fantastic. He is going to help us through the morass of the Trump impeachment. And he did a great breakdown of how he felt before the impeachment. And then he's done a breakdown of at least day one. I don't want to spoil anything. So Nate, what's going on? Is he gone?
Well, the first thing I want to just let everybody know, Trump is not being convicted, right? I don't think anybody has any illusions that Trump is going to be convicted based on this impeachment, right? It's just too political, and the parties are too far apart, right? But I like to look at this as just as a legal exercise. What is impeachment? Why is it important? Why it seems similar to some things that we know, and why it seems different. Mm-hmm. Impeachment is not a criminal trial. Now, you'll hear a lot of non-attorneys say, well, doesn't the president have the right to remain silent? Doesn't he have the right to counsel? That's just not true in an impeachment inquiry. That would be true in a criminal trial. In a criminal trial, they read your Miranda rights, right?
Right.
But in a civil trial, like for instance, think about it this way: in a civil trial, you don't have a right to an attorney, right? If somebody sues you and you can't get an attorney, that's like, so what? The state doesn't pay for an attorney. You don't have the right to remain silent because you get a deposition, right? Like they'll force, like O.J. Simpson, for instance, he didn't have to testify in his criminal trial because you had the protections, but you had to testify in a civil trial, and he lost all that money. So a lot of the protections now for impeachment is a political civil offense. In other words, the government is just saying you can't hold this office and you can't hold any of these other offices after this.
It's also weird too, isn't it? Because from what I understand, I mean, that's one of the only times that Congress themselves can actually try somebody, right?
Correct.
That's not their job.
Correct. Yes. Congress can only try you for you to lose your job and for you not to hold any more jobs after that. That's why generally, if you were impeached, there are 2 votes for impeachment. A lot of people fail to realize this. There's the first vote to convict you, and then the second vote to disqualify you. So on the first vote, you have to get 2/3 of the Senate, and then the second vote for disqualification, you just need 50%. So if they convict you, then if they want to disqualify you for future office, they can do that, or they can, or they don't have to. It all depends on how the Senate is. They can fire you from this job, and they can stop you from doing any other jobs.
Right, and this one's weird because he's already in a job that they're technically able to fire him from.
Now, this is
added confusion that you don't have the Chief Justice attending either. Probably because he's not the sitting president. I'm guessing that's why Robert's not sitting, but and then you have a member of his quote jury, who is Congress, who's actually the judge.
Well, and that's the weird thing about impeachment. See, a lot of people think impeachment is a judicial thing, right? It's like there's a court, you hear trial, but it's just not. It's a political theater, right? Impeachment is all political, and so is the conviction part of it. So
theater, specifically, great, good choice of words.
Yeah, I'm calling it political theater. Think about it. All of the senators are the victims of this particular crime, and they're sitting in judgment of that. So in this particular instance, you got the people who are actually victimized by the insurrection. And then those are the people who are now in.
Now you're calling it insurrection again versus riot. And I know earlier you corrected the record and said no, it's a riot. Now you're saying insurrection, or are you saying it for the sake of the charge?
I'm saying it for the sake of the charge. It's the articles of impeachment are for incitement of insurrection. That's why I'm using insurrection in that. Okay. I honestly think the whole thing for January 6th, I believe it was a riot that went bad. I think most of the people who went there to raise hell, and it just I think it got out of hand because the police were so underprepared for the crowd, and when they got inside, it became a full. And I do think some people were there to do what they did for an insurrection. But I don't think the majority of people who were there, and I've been involved in too many protests and stuff like that, where things you can see things going bad, and you don't say everybody's there to do something bad. Sometimes these people get caught up in the moment.
Allison, do you have any thoughts on this? Because you've been around covering Antifa. I mean, it was almost like a yearly occasion for you. So you're kind of familiar with events that can spiral a bit.
Yeah. The best argument that I've heard for this being unique is just the timing, right? Is the day and the timing of it versus, so when people kind of go back and forth and say, yeah, but what about this or what about that? The best argument I've heard for somebody to make that this would be different than just say, another riot on any other day is simply the timing of it all. Now, do I think that I agree with Nate that it's not because of opinion. It's just what I've interviewed a couple of the journalists who were there that day. And actually the Atlantic recently wrote an article about the connections that these people had to any particular group. And they actually found that only 1 in 9 of the arrests had a direct connection to any particular ideological group. And they, in making their determinations.
Which group was that?
Which group is the 1 in 9? That could include anything. It was
any group.
I know, but do you know which one it was, or they didn't specify?
They included like Proud Boys or Antifa or whatever else. They included all of those, white nationalist groups, anything like that. But only 1 in 9 had, or 10 had any affiliation whatsoever to any group. And then 9 out of 10 were, and when they made their determination, they weren't just looking at like, were you, did you have a Costco card or anything? They even if you had a patch on your jacket, you had social media posts that you referred to a group, you had a flag in your hand, they were very inclusive with the way that they were defining affiliation, and still it was very low. And so I do think that from that research plus the interviews that I've done with journalists who were there, that it's highly likely that the majority got swept up in, the emotions and the day. And I do kind of wonder, like, if you were to ask them what your end game was, I don't know what they would have said, obviously, because I haven't done those interviews, but I have a hard time believing that the majority of those people were really planning to take on like the US military, to really take over the government. I don't get the sense from the interviews I've done and just the reading I've done that the majority. Now there were people that were trained and had, backgrounds in, special operations, for instance, but I don't get the sense from what I've researched that the vast majority were there with any kind of real end game in mind. Like, this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to kidnap Nancy Pelosi. We're going to hold her for ransom, all of these things. And then, then we're going to take on, the U.S. military, and we've got tanks waiting for us back in Florida. I mean, that's just not what I've been reading. And so, like I said, do people make a decent argument that the timing of it makes it, unique compared to, say, another riot? Maybe you would agree with that. I can see that side of it. Do I think that there was this was a pre-planned, very well thought out coup attempt where you're going to really replace the U.S. government with your dictator or something? That's just not what I've learned from the people who are actually there and the reading that I've done.
I guess my one question on that is, you said that there was one person identified, and I'm wondering, is that John Sullivan? The one who was arrested and was with a CNN reporter or producer at the time.
One person. It's 1 in 10. So I don't know what that number.
Oh, okay, so
what that number is, but there were, I'm actually, what? Stay tuned, guys, because I just interviewed Jeremy Lee Quinn, who was there, and
awesome.
We went over it. So I think I'm going to post that video in the next couple of days. So head back to my channel and you'll see the whole thing. But yeah, it was a wide variety of different groups, and it did include, some like militia groups.
Okay.
But the vast majority were not tied to any specific ideological reason for being there or group, for being there, which makes it harder when, you hear the media talking about it. Well, it was this kind of attack or that kind of attack, all done in the name of ABC, whatever all the different things are. But, just reading the research that's been done on those arrest records and talking to the people who are there, it does sound like a lot of those people were definitely there to create havoc, no question, and they did believe that there was something very nefarious happening and were there on that particular day for a reason. But it doesn't, the idea that they were going to actually reinstall a new government or something, I just don't think that's supported by the research.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Okay, I got a super chat in here for you, Allison. Great discussions as always, Eric. Want to say hi to Allison. First heard about you when you were on Vance Crow's podcast.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Vance Crow's, that's great. He's a really, he has done, some PR work, and I don't know how, I think he found out about me through some farmers, because that used to be one of my main beats in environmental work, which we can talk all day about food and the environment.
And one of us will know something. At least between you and I. I'm not going to, sorry, Nate might know as well, but it would be, that's your field. Now,
Thank you.
The trial though, Nate. Okay. I think by all accounts, including the lawyers themselves, day one was a disaster for the Trump team.
Yeah, I think when you're setting up for something like this, right? So everyone knows yesterday was a unique day, right? There was a motion to dismiss, and that motion to dismiss was based on the fact that the articles of impeachment were unconstitutional. Now, the argument is that even though the House impeached President Trump while he was president, and the trial was occurring after he had left office, but the Senate didn't have jurisdiction to try and convict former officials. So the motion to dismiss was saying, well, since President Trump isn't president anymore, then we can't. Then the Senate cannot try him for an impeachment, right? He's a private citizen. You hear a lot of people say, well, can you impeach a private citizen? So that was the core issue. Now, one of the arguments against that was one of the arguments on Trump's side was that since he was a former official, and he could not be removed, only thing you could do is disqualify him. Then this was all for naught, right? There was no remedy. It's not like you could remove him from being a private citizen, but only thing you could do is disqualify him. So that was what yesterday was about. Now, the Democrats came prepared. They came prepared with precedent, with textualism. Like they came prepared for the argument to show that this was constitutional, and it happened before. The first impeachment of this country was of a former official, and there was and I think one of the things was that every impeachment that happened in the framers' lifetimes were all of former officials, and obviously the Belknap case, in which the Secretary of War at the time raised the argument, said that he was a former official, and the Senate didn't have jurisdiction. The Senate also said they had jurisdiction, and then tried him. And even though he was acquitted, there was a majority of senators who voted for his conviction, but not the 2/3 majority for conviction.
Quick question on that, because this is almost like you had mentioned the quote victims of the crime are the ones who are determining the outcome of the crime and everything else. It's kind of like the people who are going to decide the crime are the ones who are determining whether they're allowed to decide the crime.
Correct.
Or decide the case. There is some obvious, like I said earlier, weirdness. I'm being as polite as I can, but
you're right.
It's kind of odd. It's like, hey, I guess it's sort of like the judge. Hey, judge, can you recuse yourself from doing this? And then you decide if you're going to recuse yourself. It just seems nutty.
Yeah, but see, and that's the problem. The problem is that we're applying what we believe, what we understand as fairness in legal rules and court rules to a political process,
or fairness, period.
Yeah, because it all depends on what your role of fairness is. The Constitution gives us soul.
We'll use umpires on it, or referees on a football team. Hey, referee, can you make that call? Yeah, you want the referee. I make the rules.
You want that referee, right? If you give that referee can only do with the authority that we all agree, right? This referee has the authority to do that, right? And one of those rules is he has to be impartial. But impeachment, that's not the rule. The rule is the House is the sole. It's a political process. They are the sole arbiters of impeachment. Whoever they can impeach whoever they want, who's a civil officer, and the Senate makes its own rules to try it. There's a famous case, 1993, Judge Nixon, not President Nixon, but Judge Nixon. 1993.
What an unfortunate name.
Yes, go read it. But Judge Nixon was impeached by the House Representatives. That impeachment then went to a committee in the Senate, right? That committee said, well, Judge Nixon's a bad guy, so you guys should impeach him. So the Senate didn't have a trial. They just voted and impeached Judge Nixon. So Judge Nixon sued the Senate and said, well, hold on. You didn't give me a trial. You just guys had a vote. So I want my trial. I want to bring witnesses. I want a trial. So it was the exact opposite of what we have here with the Trump situation. When it's Judge Nixon, 1993, for anybody who wants to look it up. So when it went to the Supreme Court said, because the Constitution is written the way it is, the only people who can decide what officials they want to impeach are the House, and the only people who can decide what to do based on how to try that impeachment is the Senate. So the Senate, the only thing constitutionally the Senate has to do is give you the vote to convict you. That's it. 67. You need 2/3 of them to vote to convict you. The word try is whatever they want it to be. Just like with the word impeachment, it's whatever the House wants it to be. And that's the parameters that the Constitution gives those bodies. The president has no role and the judiciary has no role. It's a totally political process. So the things that we would expect to be fundamentally fair is just is inapplicable to the impeachment proceedings because it is a total political process.
Okay, and in this total political process, Trump's lawyer, at least one of them, kind of, I guess, was knocked off his game.
Yeah, what happened is that, which is weird, is that the Democrats took Trump's legal team's brief and they argued against that brief, right? They said, this witness, you misquoted this witness. This witness actually said something else previously. Turley, it showed how Turley was they were saying he's a hypocrite. They were like, he's saying something different now, but look at his writings from before. Another one of their key witnesses came out and said, hey, we weren't saying that. We actually said something different. So, so if you have a brief.
Oh, they impeached the witnesses? No, sorry.
Not impeach the witness, but there is impeaching the witnesses.
I know.
But one thing they did was showing how these witnesses weren't saying what President Trump's attorneys were saying. And I think the great thing that happened is that Trump's attorneys had a plan and their plan went to hell. And don't forget, and during the 10-minute recess, they changed their whole plan. They changed their whole presentation in that 10-minute recess. So you have 10 minutes to change everything you're going to say on the fly. They tried to do it and they just weren't successful at. That's why most people came away from it saying we didn't understand what they were trying to say, because I think they were knocked off so much by the Democrats planning for them that they didn't know what to do. And hopefully they'll know what to do Friday, but they really were thrown off guard.
Why didn't he just have Dershowitz again? Because I feel like Dershowitz wouldn't have been thrown off quite as easily.
No, I don't think so either. But again, don't forget you have a couple of things that you have to worry about though. Number one, these lawyers have to walk a fine line, because just because we're advocating for you doesn't mean we can lie to the tribunal or even lie to the public. So there's certain things that I think President Trump, for instance, the former legal team that left, there's certain things that he wanted them to say that they can't say because they don't want to lose their licenses. Obviously, look at Linwood and Sidney Powell. So now with this election thing,
are you trying to get more comments on my video?
Well, about what? No, it's just true. Look, they're threatening to be disbarred in like 4 or 5 different jurisdictions. The reason why I think is that if you're saying something that is credibly not true, you can lose your license. So these lawyers have to understand that the political spotlight's on them, where they have to walk that fine line to advocate for their client, but they can't just go out there and say BS because they don't want, they're going to have clients after this too.
Nate, can I ask you real fast? Is that a shift from what lawyers normally do?
Well, usually I think you can you can embellish a lot.
Normally, talk BS.
No, like if something's on the borderline, you can say it, right? The rule is obviously you have to speak truth or speak silent, right? So that's generally the rule. But if you don't know it's false, then there's leeway to it. But now with some of these election things, there are things that people know are absolutely false, and that's where people are getting in trouble.
Okay. That's interesting. Real fast, just to address a couple of the comments. I'm drinking water out of my mason jar, not moonshine.
Come on, don't shatter the illusion.
I know, but I don't. And the other thing is, I'm not mad at anyone because everyone's like, Alice looks disappointed that I said that. At least Viva laughs at my jokes. I'm like dealing with a 9-month-old right now, trying to pay attention to Nate's legal brain, and I'm pretty sure that my daughter just pooped in her pants while we're talking. There's a lot of things happening. So, and I also just generally speaking have RBF, if you know what that is, resting B face. So I have to work on that, and it's just hard for me to remember. Back when I was in TV news, when the anchors would toss to me, I had to remember to go. Otherwise, my normal face, it was like, I'm gonna kill you if you.
So you were not the weather girl.
Oh no.
They didn't ever let me do weather, that's for sure.
All right, well, let's to spin or to move over. I've got another case, and I have a super chat that I think will lead right into it. This is about protected speech. And they're summing it up, and I think it's probably true. You can get fired from a private company or banned from YouTube for saying what would be, quote, protected speech. You cannot be jailed for such, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And that would be taking it to that next level. And that leads into the next one. We do have criminal charges of people considering criminal charges for Trump. One thing I think everybody agrees with is that his speech on January 6th will not result in criminal charges. Is that absolutely fair assessment?
Not. Yeah, that's yeah. It's funny because it's one of those rare things where even you see the most left-wing crazy lawyer, they'll clutch their pearls and says, right, it's not incitement, like he's not going to jail for that.
Or even worse, legal.
But legal. He says it. Legal says it was protected speech. So
and that's, and I think you brought that up too, so I don't want to let that go, that it's an ironic situation where you could say possibly a president in fact is impeached for a protected speech because he's already been impeached. It's just a matter of whether he's convicted. Well, I don't know what you call it, convicted.
No, he's impeached. Impeached is like indicted. Yes, he's impeached. But there's also a double side to that coin because it is protected speech. But so is if he wore a Ku Klux Klan outfit, and gave a speech and said that he's a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. That's protected speech. But I think if he were to be impeached for that, people would be a little bit less leery of that versus this. So the thing about the fact that he did give a speech that was protected, I think that's not the proper analysis because again, this is a political process. So you could be impeached for protected speech, but I just don't think the speech that he gave and when he said go march down peacefully, I think that nullifies it enough to where it's just we're not even close to incitement. No, you don't incite people by telling them to go march peacefully and redress for your government. That's not incitement. Textbook, not incitement.
I have a weird chat question that came in. When I asked my thoughts on YouTube editing speech, as in when you post a live chat message with your phone and use a gendered emoji, it changes it to the non-engendered emoji.
I don't understand that. What does that mean? Like, can they clarify?
I guess it's like autocorrect.
Yeah.
But I don't understand what emoji is gendered that you could do a non-gendered. Like, there's the blonde lady that's doing this. So
the shrug. Yeah, I guess so.
Turn to a non-gendered, it would either have to turn it to a guy or keep it.
I don't know. Maybe they have like a round ball face that goes.
Yeah.
Besides this bald face. I don't know. All right, so
I'll marry them. I'm sorry, I'm already married. You don't want this, all right?
no worry. Okay. Oh, cute. Example incoming of that emoji. Okay. And I guess you can, because I did turn off Nightbot. He won't harass anybody.
Oh.
Other than just telling people to subscribe. So please subscribe. Keep Nightbot off your back. I definitely need that.
Oh, okay. There's the emoji. Huh.
Yeah.
Oh.
But is that so? That's different than the dude?
That looks like the female symbol. So
Yeah, it
was
looks
it
like
a
a
male
female
symbol
emoji.
turned to a female? Or wait, what?
It looks like Prince.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it looks like the artist formerly known
That's
as.
what it is.
Oh, that would be a good case for you to cover sometime, Nate.
Which one?
Prince.
Oh, his the fight against Sony with the
Yeah, Emily talked about that too. I mean, it's fascinating, that whole thing of how he essentially said it was slavery, that he had to do the records and all that, so he dropped his name.
Yeah, but he got caught in the same deal that most new artists get come up. You know, they Will Smith got caught in a bad deal like that. He had like a 10-album deal. He had done 3 albums. Then he had Independence Day, became a big Hollywood star, and the radios, you know, they said, well, you know, you still owe us 7 albums. He's like, 7 albums? I haven't cut an album in 20 years. So, you know, it happens because when you're young and you're on the come up, you sign these horrible deals for long terms that you know, that keep you,
because of you lawyers, you slick lawyers.
It's why we get paid. It's why we get paid.
All right. So while we're on it, supposedly they're looking at criminal charges possibly for Trump for that phone call about, quote, finding votes in Georgia.
Now, this is something that's interesting. There's a concept in law of sovereign immunity. And for instance, the Queen of England, if she was to come over to the United States and kill 5 people in front of us all, right? The police couldn't arrest her. They couldn't do anything. They could just, you know, they can just have her go back to her country, right?
So can they detain her or stop her in the middle
Not even,
of it?
not even. It's just like diplomatic immunity, right? It's the same thing. She's like the top diplomat of that country. So just like diplomatic immunity, you can't even be detained. You can't detain a diplomat. Nor arrest
I mean, stop her from doing it. Like if she's stabbing somebody at the time, they can't stop.
Well, yeah. Obviously, you could do something like that. But you know, let's say if you see her shoot somebody and then drop the gun and walk away, you can't arrest her. You can't detain her. That's you know, essentially textbook sovereign. That's textbook diplomatic immunity. Okay. So what happens is that principle is about, for sovereigns, is that when you're the head of the country and you're doing something while you're the head of the country, generally you can't be held accountable criminally for those actions. So I'm not sure if sovereign immunity is going to apply with this, because he was in the role of president when he committed these said crimes. So sovereign immunity may apply in this situation, but again, I'm not sure. I know the last time something like this did happen was President Clinton, after the Monica Lewinsky scandal and needed the perjury. Before he left office, he actually pleaded guilty with the FBI. He came to an agreement with the FBI, so he wasn't charged criminally for the perjury, and he lost his law license and stuff. But again, I'm not sure if this would apply to President Trump. But generally, if you are a sovereign, you can't be charged with crimes that are committed while you were a sovereign or president, for instance, or head of state. Okay, so this may be a test on that, I guess. It's possible. It's possible. But and again, I think it's going to be hard to get Trump for anything of this post-election stuff, because it's just so. I think if Trump's biggest issue is going to have to be, honestly, the New York State stuff, New York State, tax evasion stuff. I think it's going to be that's where his problem is going to be. It's not with any of this stuff, with Georgia stuff. I don't think you can get. I don't think you can get a reasonable jury to convict Trump in Georgia. Well, and it's also kind of challenging too, because everything's swirling around Trump. It's like everything with him has so much baggage that a lot of things are taken out of context. You yourself pointed out that during his speech, he said peaceably. Yeah. And they did forget to, the House managers seem to forget to mention that every time. But it's because it's not their job. It's the other guy's job to mention it, right? I understand that. But I get you. It's you want to say no, he's an innocent man, but no, they're not going to say that. But don't forget this though. One thing I think what the House managers did that was really, really good to this morning. It got repetitive late, right? They kept saying the same thing over and over again. So I was like, you guys got to stop. But I think at the beginning, what they did show was that how in September they had people asking all of these questions to Trump supporters. Hey, if Joe Biden was to win in November, would you accept the election? And everybody almost unanimously, no, it's going to be fraud. No, if he wins, must be stolen. No, if he wins, it was stolen from the president. They can't win unless they commit fraud.
Did they ask the other way?
No, they didn't ask the other way. They just
of
asked.
Course. I hate that because it's like, okay, come on.
Yeah, but that's what they were trying to. But what they were trying to show is that Trump's victory. Trump had, because Trump was saying that. Trump was saying the only way I would lose is if it was stolen and it was massive fraud. Then he loses and it's stolen and massive fraud. So what they were saying was that he planted this in people's minds in September. And then so he gave himself a no-win scenario. Either I win or it was fraud. And when he loses and they say legitimately, then now he goes and says it's fraud. So I think that was a nice way to show that the incitement wasn't just January 6th. This incitement started in September.
They were planning something way ahead of time that was referred to in a crazy long article last week.
Oh, the Time
covering a lot of bases. Yeah.
Now, one thing I didn't understand, because I read the Time article and I saw a lot of people were saying, because I was trying to figure out, I saw Viva's thing on it. I saw Alison's. I was in Alison's live stream when she was speaking about it. But I just after reading it myself, because I was like, boy, there's a lot. I just didn't get the hype, because I was watching Fox News and I was like, I didn't read, that this was a cabal, for instance. Maybe it's the way they did say
in
an article.
I mean, the word was put there. That helps.
Well, they said like conspiracy. They said all, but it was like the way the article was written was like, well, we were trying to protect it, but then we're using these methods. Like it confused me a little bit. But at the end of it, after I read it, I was like, I'm not too sure if these receipts are cashing these wolf tickets.
My bigger concerns, I guess, got deeper into it, but I don't like the fact that they were at dinners with the social media companies and helping determine things like, all this crazy election tags. Anytime he talked about it, the election was called, was called, or Hunter Biden's laptop. All of this came out of that particular situation.
Yeah.
And I won't even call it cabal, but I will call it coincidental, because it only went one direction.
I mean, they called it a cabal in the article.
Yeah, they did, right? They said it was a cabal, a conspiracy, and because it was weird the way they would call it a conspiracy, and I'm like, okay, but then the other thing they were like, well, no, it really wasn't, and they give all these altruistic reasons, but then so it's kind of like they were saying we can do this, but we were only doing it for the good reason. So my concern with the whole thing was, hey, it's like telling me you can do something and then making me believe you're doing it for my benefit. That's what I got from that article. Like,
have you seen Scott Adams talking about that? Because it resonated so strongly. If you look at what Scott Adams was talking about,
I guess my big question is, how different is this from what is typically happening behind the scenes for elections? I guess it, maybe on scale, but one of the questions that I guess in the days of contemplating that after my live stream was, maybe this kind of stuff's happening all the time behind the scenes, messaging and I mean, just think about like the DNC Hillary versus Bernie issue back in 2016.
That was a big issue.
Still,
like feeding the debate questions.
Yeah, exactly.
That was huge. That was actual chicanery, though. I mean,
so that's what I'm saying. You could argue on scale that this is significantly different, I guess. Looking at the Time article, because that's what she's trying to argue, that it was different in scale. But in some way, I kind of wonder if they're actually just basically revealing to all of us that this is how it works. And perhaps they didn't necessarily mean to show their cards on that one. The other question I have is why now? And maybe, I'm getting to the point where I'm questioning pretty much everything when it comes to like what's out there. And so is it really, was it, it was its intended consequence? Like the Hill, they did something like they accidentally stoked fears among GOP voters. What was that, an accident?
I don't think that's accident.
In that way, accidentally. I mean, that was like a haunted, night. Like if you were going to sitting around a campfire and you were to describe the election for a campfire, on a Saturday night or something with s'mores, like that's the way you would write it. And so I don't think those words by a professional writer were chosen accidentally. So then my question is, maybe they wanted people to be afraid. Maybe this is exactly the reaction that they wanted. I don't know. I guess more and more I'm asking myself, what's really going on here? Like, not just accepting that these things just happen randomly at certain times and with unintended accidental consequences, like some of the commentators have said, maybe this is exactly what they wanted. And at the very least, I don't think it's necessarily, I really don't believe that article describes something that in some way hasn't already happened in the past with past elections. And like I've said to Eric, just behind the scenes. Thank you. Yes, Lily is weighing in.
Producer calls.
But it's kind of one of those things where, the United States has obviously been involved. Okay.
She wants you to stay on message.
Yeah, exactly. The United States has obviously been involved in stuff overseas when it comes to influencing, regime changes and all kinds of stuff. So it's like, to think that there's not a possibility that there's stuff happening behind the scenes, in our own country, I think is, I just think that's naive, and like I said, I can't confirm or deny anything that's in the article. I've said before, it's way above my pay grade, what's really going on. But the idea that it's not only something that's been in the news before, obviously, like we just said, the Bernie Hillary thing is a good example of that. But it's also like if our government does this kind of stuff in other areas, why wouldn't there be some, I guess you could easily make an argument that it's possible there's other stuff going on there. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, well, one thing it did expose the tactics and how vulnerable the system is to this influence. And I think they were trying to say, well, they showed how they were influencing the system or trying to combat what they considered to be negative influence. But again, that leads you down that path is who gets to choose what's negative, who gets to choose what's the right, who gets to choose, because it always comes down to the person deciding what is fake news versus what is not fake news is the person usually with all the power. It's the person who makes the decision on what you can hear. So.
Well, that's the whole, and that I bring up Scott Adams again because he laid it out so perfectly, and that's where it's like, damn, this is an echo. Mm-hmm. If you want to shape an election or really influence people, first thing you've got to do is convince everybody this is Hitler. This is actually Hitler again. And I just demonetized this. I'm sorry, Allison. This is actually the World War II rah, rah, rah guy, to quote Norm Macdonald.
But that didn't work for Trump, though. They didn't, because that's what people were more or less saying he was.
Well, that's my point. So if you're going to, set this narrative, now, once you've convinced them that Orange Man bad, that's so bad, then now it's no longer is this the right thing or wrong thing? It's the old, do you punch Hitler? Do you punch a Nazi? Do you, whatever. Once you go to that point, now you have a lot of people that are willing to take this extra step, if you will. It's like, okay, that may not be exactly perfect or ethical. We'll even just go say ethical and not necessarily illegal, depending. But, that's literally Hitler. And so now I feel like this article, however you want to shape it out, is kind of spiking the ball saying, we stopped Hitler, check us out.
I don't know. I think it depends on, like, again, like what I said on my live stream is, depending on what you think of Trump, you're going to come to that article with very different ideas of what to get out of it. And I don't really think those two, if you were to divide it into two parties, people who I've read this, other journalists that I've read sort of commentary on, not recently, but stuff just like covering Trump's presidency. There are kind of two ways of looking at it. If you see him as a continuation of American policy, like him or don't like him, but you see him as on spectrum of, continuation of American policy, you're going to have a very different read than if you see him as a total divergence, very new, different in kind and nature and severity. If you see him that way, yeah, that's going to shape the way you see very many things. What tech companies should do, what activist groups should do. And I don't think those two parties are able to really reconcile. I don't see that as a possibility. These are just two ways of looking at it.
You can further divide that, though, just because you see him as a change agent, which he was. I mean, he's very different. He is nobody we've ever had before. That doesn't mean you're a fan or not a fan. Like I'm a rarity that I'm actually kind of neutral towards the dude.
Well, when I mean a divergence, I mean in level of like needs to be stopped. It depends on if you see his policy as in some. I think character-wise and the way he talked rhetorically, yes, very different. I'm not quite sure that. You could have debate over whether people think that from a policy standpoint he diverges so differently
no, not that
in
much.
fascistic ways. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm saying. And those two sides, the person who sees him as an autocrat versus the person who, and I'm not talking about necessarily people who just really like him. I'm talking about on the two I don't like him sides even.
Right.
You're going to have people who are like, I don't like him, but I don't see him as somebody who has to, who needs, we need to start acting like even illegally potentially to stop, which is what people believed about Hitler, that, you would break the law to try to potentially assassinate him, for instance, because you needed to get him out of the way. Sure. So, so it's like, how do you see Trump? And depending on the danger you see that he posed, you're going to read that Time article very differently. But again, like what was their point with the article? Why share all that information? That's the part.
There's more to come. That's why. There's more to come. That was kind of a precursor.
One thing, though, and I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to get a lot of heat from my liberal friends, but like even today, I still struggle with how I feel about Trump, and I'll let you guys know why. Being from New York, Trump is a staple here in the city, and I remember seeing Trump and dinners with Al Sharpton and all these black leaders and people saying, you should, Trump is such great to the black community. And, Trump was, dated black. Like it was a totally different thing with Trump being here in New York.
Pop culture.
He was on Oprah. Remember, he was on Oprah and, Oprah asked him, are you ever going to run for president? And he was like, yeah, it was Trump was a liberal lion. He gave to Democrats. He was best friends with Hillary. He was at Hillary Clinton's wedding, right? I mean, he invited Hillary Clinton to his wedding, So it was interesting to see because when Trump started running, I was like, well, he's saying some crazy things, but at the core, he's giving these people millions of dollars. He's been, he's been entrenched in the Democratic Party. He's really a Democrat, and he's just acting like a Republican. And then to see when he did turn and how he went from being, jet man of the year to all of a sudden, no, he's never jet ebony man of the year. But from this,
that might be a little stretch.
But from this, you can see the pictures of him with, from him being in a room, talking black issues with Al Sharpton and Reverend Jesse Jackson to now being the embodiment of Hitler. It just was like, how do we get there? And I think for someone, it seems to me to just all be politics, and the politics of the day are not to beat my opponent on ideas. It's to demonize them. You're not a good person. You do these bad things to make people fear voting for you. And Trump was able to get over that because Hillary Clinton, I feared Hillary Clinton just as much as I feared Trump because, it was just, she had that type of awe about her and obviously the things that she did with Bell. And Trump was saying the same things. The one of the things that made me feel different about Trump is that Trump was saying all the things I liked. Hey, listen, you know what? All these politicians are corrupt. You know how I know? Because I paid them. I gave these politicians, all right? They answer to me, right? I'm the one cutting the check. So let's cut out the middleman. Let's cut the Hillary Clintons out, and I'll be running it directly. So you go directly for me. That's, it made me think like, yeah, this guy's not telling me BS. He's telling me what's true. Now, when it comes to actually running the country, I think, he got maybe above his skis. And I think he didn't understand the complexity of government, but who does, And I think he's trying to run it as his business, but, that just wasn't working for the monstrosity of the federal government. And I think, unfortunately, he made a lot of mistakes, COVID and things like, he's running it as a business, but the business, you're worried about PR. You're worried about what people think, but you're not worried about, but because all of that has to do with your bottom line. But I think with the country, it's not really about the bottom line, but getting, achieving these goals. And I think that's kind of the reconciliation with Trump. But I think at the end of the day, Trump, unfortunately, he's going to go down as, when people look back at the history of Trump, they're going to see before the year 2016, he was probably one of the best known Democrats in the country. Oprah was saying he should run for president. After that, he's probably one of the most hated Republicans on the Democratic side. And that is the difference between 2014 Trump and 2015 Trump when he ran for president.
Well, I want to see 100 years from now. I got a couple super chats I don't want to slide away. And this is semi-tied to it, but is it not true that this trial is a bill of attainder and thus unconstitutional? And I know you talked about that in your video a little bit.
No, because a bill of attainder is, let's say the legislature doesn't like BLM. So they go pass a law, and and I'm just making it up. If you are part of BLM, you are now a criminal. So they essentially made everybody who are members of BLM criminals. So that would be a bill of attainder. I want to punish these group of people, so I've created that. It's more or less you're taking the power from the judiciary and creating and punishing the people through the legislature. That's why it's illegal. Now, this isn't that, because the problem, the difference I think Trump lawyers didn't understand was that in both civil and criminal trials, there's what they call statute of limitations. So let's say the statute of limitations for a case runs out tomorrow, but I file my case today, or I get my indictment today. Then we can have the trial a year later, right? We can have the trial a year later. And that trial, it really depends on when the accusatory document was filed, not with when the trial happens. And that's what we're having here. We're having a trial based on his conduct in office. And they're saying that we impeached him while he was in office, and now we're having the trial, the judgment of that impeachment, because that's what the Senate do. They judges that those impeachments now.
Perfect. Allison, what are your thoughts? What is your producer saying?
She's in makeup and hair right now. I gave her my blush brush and
good.
my regular brush. She's got no hair, so I don't know. She's eating it instead. I honestly, God, I don't know. This is not an area that I'm super familiar with, so I'm gonna just say that. Well, honestly, this is a kind of sort of on this note, but I feel so much more aware of what is happening on this scene, even though I'm still kind of a newbie, thanks to new media and YouTube and channels like Nate's, and the others, like lawyers that are out there doing these breakdowns, than I ever did in mainstream media. And that really goes for pretty much every topic related to, especially culture war stuff. I really had no idea what I didn't know when I was in mainstream news. And it's been new media that's given me a whole new opportunity to understand the nuances of what's going on. So, and I know that's not really totally on topic, but it's just to say, like, thanks to Nate for say that again.
That's what the show's about.
Yeah. Well, I just think that it's such a, that, I mean, we could switch to the 2:30 stuff too, because this is, that could affect our ability to do these kinds of live streams and whatnot and talk about these issues. But it's really significant, the understanding I have of the nuances of some of the stuff that is really pushing not this impeachment specifically, but just pushing our political world and, our social structure at this point, that when I go back and talk to a lot of my friends who are still in mainstream media, they've just not even heard of like certain movements that are happening online. And just, there's so much now that's happening on YouTube and new media that's actually informing the real world in a way that is maybe even more significant than what mainstream news is doing. And so having the ability to talk about this stuff is really important, which is why I do a lot of free speech topics on my channel, is just to preserve that, because I think it is the people's microphone. It is the truth that finally that people can have in their own hands now, instead of relying on someone else to tell them what it is. Right? Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Well, perfectly. On that note, I'm going to wrap up with a final story that applies directly to us as creators. While we're talking about new media and everything else, I don't know if you guys have both seen this before or not, Nate, but a YouTuber was filming a prank video outside of Nashville. And this prank video was, let's go chase people with butcher knives and go at them and see what happens. Won't that be funny? What could ever go wrong? And well, he was shot because obviously somebody didn't get the memo that a nutcase with a butcher knife was actually making a YouTube video in order to get clicks.
Right.
And why I'm bringing this up is all three of us have YouTube channels. All three of us are familiar with Social Blade. All three of us are concerned. Are people liking this? Are they giving us clicks? Are we getting attention? Is this getting attention? Is that getting attention?
Mm-hmm.
Do you worry about us getting to this crazy point? I mean, somebody died, for God's sake. And I'm sorry if somebody's coming at me with a butcher knife and they get shot. Well, and yes, Jason Carswell. Some could say a Darwin Award. I think definitely a potential candidate. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changing the way people behave. This world is changing the way people behave in real life. That's not a surprise, and that's not breaking news. It's changing the way we relate to each other at home. It's in the office, and not always in good ways. I guess at the end of the day, the way I always fall on the line that, if you were to start regulating in a way that keeps that kind of stuff from happening, as much as I hate that happened, are you going to take away the ability of people to, talk about all kinds of other things? Because say that gets characterized as harmful behavior, for instance, what else falls under the harmful behavior category? And so whenever you're discussing these issues of like regulation prompted by, say, something like that, you have to ask yourself, like, what else could be thrown out with it? And we've obviously seen wide nets cast for defining what, is allowable speech on these platforms. And both sides of the aisle are going after them to change Section 230 and the regulations around that for different reasons, obviously. But it's definitely something to pay attention to. And it's unfortunate. I think people are in some ways not recognizing that, this is it's kind of like it kind of reminds me of being in mainstream news, where you live in this world of just craziness every day. It gets so normalized because you that's all you do every day is the worst or the best. You have these two extremes that you're constantly going back and forth between, and you're not used to normal life. So you just think everything's supposed to be that way. So you have to really work on like turning that off when you go home. And so I think, maybe for the average person, this world has created this, almost like Alice in Wonderland thing where you have to pinch yourself and remind yourself that when you're, this is its own separate thing, and that, there are real world consequences to behaving a certain way where, this person unfortunately learned the hard way, and it's terrible. It sucks. But my mind always goes to, okay, so, if you're going to change the rules, to try to prevent stuff like that from happening. You know, what else ends up getting affected by that? And it's funny that you even brought that up, because I was literally a couple hours ago just randomly scrolling through Facebook to see what was going on. And you know, those people who always do the engagement videos where they're just like, they have the woman, for instance, blindfolded, and she's holding a sign like, my boyfriend's about to propose, and then he, throw the sign down. We've been together 12 years, throw the sign down, whatever. And like, you're watching it and they don't know. So this one was, I cheated on my husband. She doesn't know. So the guy's like, it's your birthday, baby, and he's got her blindfolded and she's holding the sign like, I cheated. And, the next sign's like, and he's about to kick me out, and then the next sign is, and he cheated on with my brother, and the camera pans over and the brother's blindfolded too. And so he doesn't know what's going on. And so finally at the end, he hands her a cake. Okay, take it off and your blindfold off and blow out the candles. And it says, get out of my house or something. And she's like, what? Get out of my, and the brother takes off his bike. What? But it was totally staged. So these things used to actually be real. And now people are just doing them for, so the whole, it is kind of a mess, what's out there and what you're watching. You have to be very careful about consuming information. It's just with a level of risk comes a level of reward. And so that's where I go back to. It's like, we have so much more opportunity than we've ever had to know what's really going on in the world around us. At the same time, there comes a significant risk with that. And so you have to be aware of what you're consuming. And
Nate is consuming a mute button.
I forgot I'm muted. One thing I always found is that I was asking a friend of mine the other day, when was the last time you just sat down and watched TV for just an hour? Just regular broadcast TV, Channel 7, Channel 5.
We don't have it.
It wasn't a football game. Most people don't. It's interesting. Most people don't. And when was the last time what media do you consume? And generally the older generation still goes and watches Fox News, but generally the younger generation, it's YouTube. The younger your children are, the more likely they're watching or consuming YouTube. And I think now the one thing that this platform has given us is the ability to compete with broadcast media. Right. Because the 50,000 people on the Nate Brody channel, I would have never known who I was if we were back in the 80s, right? Because you'd have to have a broadcast station and everything. So this gives us that ability to get a message out there. Now, some people have taken it one way and some people taking it the other way. I think we try to be responsible with the messages that we give out and the facts that are behind that message, right? We research, we try to be, and we try to build a relationship with the fans to say, even though I'm going to give you my opinion and I'm going to give you these facts, but understand this is going to be as best as I can do with the tools that I have to be factually correct. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to tell you I'm wrong. Hey, I was wrong.
Unless you're the Young Turks, maybe.
Yeah, unless you're the Young Turks. But that's kind of how we've been building our base. Now, if your base is built through shock and awe, then you're only as good as your last video, and you're only as good as your last shock, and you're only as good as your last awe. So you have to continually up the scale to keep people engaged. So I really depend. So I think it really depends on the type of channel that you put out there. If you're putting something out there for the clicks, for the views, and that is precipitated by you shocking people and being, doing some shocking event, like brandishing a knife in New York City is a crime. You can't pull out a knife and start waving a knife at somebody. That's menacing. That's what we call menacing. You can be charged with a felony here in the city. But I also think we also have to understand that there's a financial motive to this thing too. So it's interesting to bring it back to the point of how our channels and how we have to compete for those views and for clicks. I think that story is different and because of the way that person's doing it versus the way I think we do it.
Fair enough. Now, I guess to this, the moral of the story is subscribe to Nate the Lawyer. You can find him on YouTube. Subscribe to Alison Morrow. Subscribe to Eric Hunley. So that way we don't have to go chasing anybody with butcher knives hoping to get a click or a view. And while we're at it, folks, please hit like. And in the comments, if you don't mind, please tell us, do you like this? Do you want us to keep doing this fortnightly or weekly? And don't get caught up because fortnightly is just so cool. Speak your emotions and feelings.
How did the game get its name Fortnite?
I don't know.
Okay.
2 weeks. Fortnight's 2 weeks. Maybe I had 2 weeks to do the mission.
There may be a goal. How does
Okay.
Fortnite
All
get
right.
its name?
Jeffrey Fildy is a smart man. He
Yeah.
chose us over Tim Pool.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jeff's awesome.
Rockstar.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I think my kid's probably going to have a YouTube channel at some point because well, or she's going to hate everything about YouTube. It's either going to be she's going to hate everything about YouTube, like I hated everything about hospitals because both of my parents are doctors, or she's going to be, I'm just nervous she's going to turn out like Lindsay Lohan because she's around it too early in life, So I want to keep her at, to go back to the stripper conversation. Hey. My husband always goes, Lily, our main goal in life is just to keep you off the pole. You know what I mean? Like that's all we're trying to do. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's why you're far in the country. There won't be enough audience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I really enjoyed the live streams. It just, it's just tough. Like hopefully when Lynn gets back, hopefully it'll be a little bit easier. So you won't have to do the childcare thing at the same time.
Well, awesome. And whenever we do it again, we'll let everybody know it will be Wednesday at 8 p.m. I don't know if it'll be next Wednesday or the following Wednesday. Again, please comment in the comments because it also feeds the algorithm. So I have ulterior motives. Friday, Nate will be back with me and Viva Fry at noon if anybody wants to check that out. And then tomorrow night, I have Lena Cisco and Ellie Johnson, who is a police officer out of Australia. We'll be talking more body language, statement analysis, truth detection. And Allison, what do you have coming up? Besides your mute button.
I have to unmute myself. Well, I have my interview that I mentioned with Jeremy Lee Quinn talking about basically the response of the U.S. government towards domestic terrorism and taking a closer look again at the makeup of the folks who were at the riot at the Capitol and looking at the government response to it and who this could potentially affect. And then additionally, this guy that I used to interview back when I was an environmental reporter who started a conservative environmental group out of college. He was in college at the University of Washington and is a conservative, but he wanted to start getting conservatives, mobilized to care about the environmental issues. Cause unfortunately it's often, it's often dichotomized, unfairly, I think, and probably inaccurately as if it's just something that people on the left care about. They just often have different ways of approaching it. And so, I interviewed him back when I was in mainstream news and he's agreed to do a live stream with me on Saturday to just talk about what it's like. First off, what it's like being a conservative in college in Seattle, and then caring about the environment. And, it's funny because he's gone on some shows to talk about his work and, conservative shows with speakers who, when they try to go on college campuses, like the mob show up, those kind of people. So I'm excited to talk to him about what that's like, going on these really big YouTube shows with conservative hosts and then going back to Seattle to college, what that's like. So that'll be Saturday.
Oh, perfect. Now, even nearer to everybody, so we can give Nate a little time to breathe. He's going on with Uncivil Law. Is it on the Nate the Lawyer channel or the Uncivil Law channel tonight?
Yeah, tonight we're going to go in at 10 o'clock. Me and Uncivil Law, we're going to go over some the impeachment. Then there's a case we're following about a YouTuber who's being sued for defamation. A YouTuber has 9 million subs versus a YouTuber who has 100,000 subs and being sued for defamation. Katie Joy. Yeah, Katie Joy. That's another bomb that's gone off. Also, I have the New York Times. I'm going to be in the New York Times article which nice. They're going to link my channel to the article, which is going to be nice.
Oh, so we knew him when?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. It's about, just for everybody knows, in my practice, I take cases for people for pro bono, people who can't pay. So there are young men in my community who can't pay for a lawyer. So when they get caught up, on, let's say, a misdemeanor assault or weed charges or drug charges, I'll take the case and just represent them. And I've always found it, and any lawyer will tell you who does defense work, that when you have a lawyer who's invested in your case a little bit, you get better outcomes. So for instance, most of my clients, they get off. It's easy because especially I have like relationships with some of the DAs. So what happens is this is one case that I took that was pro bono for free. I remember the mom wanted to cook me dinner because she was like, hey, you did such a great job. Thank you. Because I got the son off.
That's
So
nice.
she was like, I'll cook you dinner, but I never got the day. I never went and got the dinner. But what happens in this case is that there was an assault that occurred, and the person that was assaulted was a serial rapist, and it occurred right after he had assaulted a woman, and it was just it happened. And my client was involved because he was a person who kind of walked in, and the fight happened. So the police arrested my guy. Obviously, what happens is that I, in my investigation, representing this guy, found that this person, the person he assaulted, had done this sexual assault to something like 5 or 6 other women. Actually, 3 other women. Let me. It was 5 that were alleged, but there's 3 other women who came forward and said, yes, this person sexually assaulted us too, and even videotaped his assaults to these women. So I notified the district attorney's office, and they didn't follow up. So then, so obviously, when the New York Times got involved, they were like, well, hold on, Nate, he told you that this guy, he told you there was tapes. He told you, these people found it. So the DA's office at first said, well, no, you did not tell us, but I had put it in my motions that, this guy had committed these different assaults. They were on tape and all that. So the DA's office last week came forward and said, yes, I had notified them, and they dropped the ball. So now they're reinvestigating the serial rapist. It's going to be a fascinating story, but it's supposed to be coming out, I think, in a couple of weeks. But that's what happens. It's a case that it's funny because all the paid cases I get are always, we always have all these hush agreements. Nobody can say anything about it. But then the free cases are the ones that get media attention. So,
but that's at least
Really
interesting. You're doing a service.
Yeah, thank you for doing all that, Nate. Really.
Oh, that's something. Well, that was one of my reasons of going to law school, to try to help just people in need. Because one of the biggest issues when you're dealing with law enforcement is that a lot of people, like I know people who've gone to jail for long terms, not because they were guilty, it's because they had bad lawyers.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get a lawyer who just has a million cases, and you get to the point where the DA is offering you spend 6 months in jail and go home after that, or you can spend 5 years in jail. And a lot of people take the 6 months. It's a lot easier.
Or plead out so they can go back to work because they're being held without bail, or without bail, and they can't afford bail, or all that garbage.
It's a lot of people don't know how tough it is when you get arrested for just even the minor stuff, how much it just disrupts your life. So
that's one of the reasons that I changed my mind on the death penalty, and still am anti-death penalty, because I would, what is the saying, like, let 100
guilty people go free.
Then
yeah. I mean, I've heard so many cases where you just, what, Nate, between you and some of the other lawyers that I listen to, I really sit back and wonder, my producer's about to take down my background right now, but so I'll make this I really do wonder about our justice system sometimes. And I think now that's not just like a liberal talking point. Now I think there are people on the right who question the justice system as well. I wonder about what the future of the justice system looks like now that it's going to get it from both sides. Same with the media, and so, we'll see. But it's been interesting to watch the last few years. I feel like I've learned a lot more about what I used to think was a nonpartisan. I just thought you just interpreted the law in the same way I just thought you just did science, and I guess it's naive to think that if it's has humans involved, then it's going to have human influences.
Yeah, it's sad, but the true reality is a lot of times the outcomes are determined by the quality of attorney you get. The better the attorney, look at OJ. OJ had the dream team. Sure. If OJ just got regular attorneys, I don't think you get off with all that DNA.
Well, Barnes says he is not guilty,
but not to say it's so even if you accept the premise that he's not guilty, I'm just saying based on the evidence, that's a hard case to win for the defense team. but they were able to do it. But he was paying them something like what, $500,000 a day or something like that. So some crazy amount to get him off. It's you get what you pay for. And unfortunately, until we can figure out a system, because I want to be clear in this. This is the justice system that we have today is the best justice system in the history of mankind, right? Just the rules, the procedures. If you want to be charged in the fairest system on the planet, you're talking about maybe the American or maybe one of the European justice systems, because this took a lot. If you go back to 100 years, they were tying you up in ropes and seeing if you're floating.
Well, you wouldn't have time to get tried. You would be
yeah.
I mean,
so understand, we don't want to throw out we don't want to throw out the good because it's not perfect. The system is never going to be perfect. But how do you, and that's why, what's the saying? We're always trying to make a more perfect union. We know there are holes in the system, and hopefully we can clear them up. I've known many people who've pled guilty to crimes they did not commit because they've had to make that choice between going to work, being there for their family, or saying that they did something they didn't do. And a lot of times, if you have that choice, a lot of people sit here and say they'll never make that choice. I'll never plead guilty to something I didn't do. That's just a lie. A lot of people, when they're put under that pressure and you're in a police station, I'm telling you, either you say you did this or you want to go home. A lot of people say what I want them to say just to go home. That's just the reality of it.
Well, on that happy note,
and
we may be discussing that in the future, Nate. I don't know if you'll be here.
After somebody for your YouTube channel with a knife, just
yes. So again, everybody subscribe so you can catch Nate when he comes back on, and we can dispense more cheer. Thank you guys so much.